So right now we have a list of films on this film list page. In this video we're going to add some filtering to this list page, and we're going to allow users to filter the films that they are seeing by a set of tags that are added to those films. So imagine for The Godfather we could add tags such as crime or mafia. We want the list of all of the tags to appear above this film list, and we want to be able to click those tags and filter down the resulting list. We're going to see how to build that in this video, and in order to do so we're going to use a package called Django-taggit, and that's to add these tags on the back end to our Django film model in order to apply the tags to that model and then allow us to get that data back in the front end and filter by those tags. Now to follow along, we're going to continue from the last video, which was video 4. You can get that code from GitHub. I'll leave a link to this repository below the video. Now what we need to do, going back to VS Code here, if we go to the back end and we go to the models.py file, we have one model in this application, and this Django model currently has 4 fields. What we're going to do now is add another field for the tags. So let's stop Django's development server, and what we're going to do is go to the documentation for Django-taggit. I'll leave a link to this below the video. We can go to the getting started section, and we're going to copy this pip install command, and that's going to be pasted and installed into this virtual environment that we're using for the Django backend. Once we've added Django-taggit, what we can do is go back to the documentation, and we're going to see how to add a tags taggable manager to our Django model class. It's very easy to do this. We can simply import this taggable manager from the taggit.managers module. So let's do that in models.py just at the top here. And then what we can do is we can declare this manager by setting a variable that we'll call tags. You can call that anything you want, but we're going to set that equal to an instance of that taggable manager. Now one other thing we need to do is open the settings.py file, and I'm going to add taggit to the installed apps in this Django application. So just at the bottom here, let's add taggit, and once we've added that, we can run the python manage.py migrate command. And that's because Django-taggit is going to add a couple of tables to the database, and these tables allow the flexible tracking of tags in your application. Now I'm going to open the database browser for SQLite here, where we have all of the tables in the database, and you can see some at the bottom here that have the application name of taggit. We have a tag table, and this just stores the raw name of all of the tags that we have in the application. And we also have this tagged item table, so if we click on that, we can see we get some columns here. For example, the tag ID, which is going to link it back to that tag table with the name. And we also have the object ID and the content type ID columns here. And these allow the flexible linking of a tag with its ID to an object of a particular content type. So basically any other model in the Django application. This is going to use the content types framework and also the concept of a generic foreign key to link a tag potentially to multiple different models. So that's just a bit of extra knowledge. If we look at the database there, we'll have a look at the data once it's added in that database. What we're going to do now is we're going to go back to the code, and we're going to go to the serializers.py file. We need to add the tags to the serialized data that we're getting back here. And I'm going to go back to the Django-taggit documentation, and we're going to go to this usage with Django REST framework section. And as it says here, because the tags in Django-taggit need to be added into a taggable manager, we can't use the usual serializer that you get from Django REST framework. What we're going to do is basically copy this code here. So let's start with the imports, and we're going to paste that into the top of serializers.py. We're importing 2 objects from taggit.serializers. Firstly, we have the taggit list serializer, and that's a serializer field that can write out a tag list. So if a film in our case has a list of tags, this serializer field is going to be what's responsible for converting that into the JSON data that we return to the Svelte application. And as well as that, we're importing the taggit serializer as well. Now if we go back to the documentation, you can see that the serializer class is inheriting from the taggit serializer as well as the Django REST framework model serializer. So this is multiple inheritance. We're going to copy the taggit serializer and add that into this class here, so we're going to inherit from that as well as the model serializer. Once we've done that, let's go back to the documentation, and we can add a field called tags by instantiating the tag list serializer field. So we're going to copy that line of code and we're going to place that into our film serializer, and then we can add the tags to the list of fields or the tuple of fields that are being returned from this serializer. And I'm going to do one last thing in this serializer. I'm going to add a default value of an empty list if we have a film that doesn't have any tags. We don't want that to be null, we're just going to add a default value of an empty list. So let's now go to the Django admin UI and add some tags to films. We're going to start the Django server and we're going to go to the admin interface. And we have this model of tags here under the 𝗕𝗏𝗏 section. Now currently we don't have any tags in this database. What I'm going to do now is add a tag, and it's very simple to add a tag. We can just give it a name, and in this case I'm going to add the name of crime. So this film, or some of the films in the database, might have the tag of crime. And we can directly add that to the tagged items to a particular object in the database. So I'm going to select the content type as being the film model. And the object ID, we need to get the primary key of the film that we want to add the tag to. So I'm going to go back to the home page. We're going to go to the films model. We have 2 films in the database, and I want to add the crime tag to the Godfather. And you can see in the URL that has a primary key of 2. So what we're going to do is go back to this section here, and I'm going to add the ID of 2 in here. So we're linking this tag to the film The Godfather, which has the ID of 2. We can link it to many items of different model types as well because of this generic foreign key that we have. But let's now save this, and we're going to go back to this page here. I'm going to add a couple of extra tags now. So we now have 4 tags in the database: comedy, crime, mafia and slacker, and these are applied to the 2 films that we have. And as we add more films, we're going to add the tags to the forms in the Svelte application and allow us to specify tags that should be applied to those films. Let's now test if this is working on the API. What I'm going to do is paste in the API root for the film's endpoint. And you can see now that for each film, we have a new key in the response, and that's for the tags that are added to that film. And you can see for The Godfather, we have the 2 tags of crime and mafia. And for The Big Lebowski, we're getting comedy and slacker. So now we have this new key of tags that's returning a list of all of the tags that are on that film. So now we need to accept those tags in the Svelte application. Let's go back to VS Code, and we're going to go to the front end of this project, and that contains the Svelte app, and that's in the source directory. Now under the roots directory here, we have another directory called films, and if we open that, we have a page.svelte file. This is for the film list page in the Svelte application. That's the one that you see on this page here. We now want to add tags into the mix here. So let's go back to VS Code, and what I'm going to do here is define a variable called tags, and we're going to default that to an empty array. Now we have the tags available on the objects that are coming back from this API, as you can see in this new response here. But what we want to do is extract all of these tags and store them, or store the unique tags in this array. So what we're going to do is we're going to define a function here called setTags. That's going to be responsible for populating that array of tags. And I'm going to use an arrow function here. And what we can do is we can define a set in JavaScript by using the new set. So we have a variable called tagSet, which is equal to a set object. Now we're going to loop over all of the films in the film store and remove the duplicate tags, and that's why we're using a set. A set cannot contain duplicates, so that's the data structure that we're going to use here. So I'm going to look at the film store values. We can get the values directly by prepending the film store with the $, and then we can use the .map function. Now the film store is storing a JavaScript array of the films that we're getting back from the API, and arrays in JavaScript have a map function that we can use to perform some sort of operation on the elements of that array. So we're going to loop over each film, and for each film we're going to get the tags, and then we're going to loop over all of the tags that are in that particular film's list. So we can use the for each function, and that's because the film.tags is going to refer to an array here, as you can see in this data coming back from the back end. So we're going to loop over each tag, so we can give that a name of tag, and what we're going to do is we're going to take the tag set that we defined above, and we can call the .add method on that set. And we're just going to add the tag into the set. Now the way this will work, if we have a tag called mafia and that's not in the set, when we call tagset.add, it's going to add it to the set. But if it's already in the set and it's part of another film's list of tags, when we call the tagset.add method and add that again to the set, it's not going to add a duplicate, and that's because the set will not accept the duplicate, but it's not going to complain either. It will just ignore the operation. So we're adding all of the tags into this set, which is going to give us all of the unique tags in the application. And what I'm going to do at the end of that process is I'm going to set the tags array that we defined in the component, and I'm going to use the array.from method. .from is a static function on the JavaScript array object, and we can pass the tag set into that. And that's going to convert the set to a normal JavaScript array containing those unique tags. So I hope that logic makes sense. This is just getting all of the unique tags from each film that's coming back from the list endpoint. What we can then do in the onMount function is call the setTags method. So just below this if statement, I'm going to paste that function and we can call that, and that's going to then process those tags from the data that we have in this store. And once we've done that, we can add those tags to the markup of the Svelte component. So into the HTML, we're going to add all of these tags. Now I'm going to do it at the top, above this loop where we loop over each film. What we're going to do is above the film cards, we're going to display all of the tags in that tag list, and we're going to allow the user to click those tags and filter down the films by that particular tag. So let's do that now. Above, or rather just below the H2 tag, I'm going to create a div here with a class of margin_y4, and we're going to put all of the tags that we have into this div here by looping over them. So for each tag, what we're going to do is, and don't forget to close that each loop, what we're going to do is we're going to add a button here, and I'm going to give that button some classes from Bootstrap, and inside that button we're going to add the name of the tag that we're looping over from that array. So let's now save this page.svelte file and go back to the application, and if we refresh this page, you can see we now have these tags that are appearing above the list of films, and we have all of the unique tags that are coming back from the server, and those unique tags have been extracted using this function called setTags, and that is then stored in this component variable called tags. So we now have a button for each tag here in this div, but we want to add a click event to each of these tags so that when a user, for example, clicks the 𝗵𝗽 tag, we want to filter down the list to only the films that have that tag. So let's go back to the code, and I'm going to add it to this button here. So the attribute is going to be the onClick attribute, and we're going to set that equal to a function that we're going to call here. So what I'm going to do is define the arrow function, and what I'm going to do is set a variable that we're going to call selected_tag equal to the tag that has been clicked here. Now, as you can see in VS Code, it's complaining that we don't have this variable in our component. So let's go to the top, and just underneath the tags list, we're going to define another variable called selected_tag. And let's give that a default value of an empty list when the page first loads before the user has clicked any of the tags. So that should capture the user's selection. Let's test that out. Just below the film list header 2, we're going to add the selected tag and just print that out onto the page to make sure that this is working. If we go back to this page, when we click 𝗵𝗽, you can see that it appears on the page, and that is changing when the particular tag is being clicked, and it's updating the state that is stored in that selected tag variable. So let's remove that declaration. And what I'm also going to do, just before we add the logic for the filtering, I'm going to add a catch-all button for all of the films. So imagine that we've filtered down to just the slacker movies. We could change the comedy or one of the other tags, but sometimes we might want to get back all of the films that we had originally. So I'm going to add a button here for all of the films. So let's go back to VS Code, and this button here, I'm going to copy that, and underneath the each loop, what we're going to do is we're going to define one more button here, and that's going to be a button that just says all instead of referencing a tag. And when that button is clicked, we're not going to set the selected tag to any particular tag. I'm just going to set it back to the empty string that was the default value that we had in the component. Let's save this and go back to the page, and now we have this catch-all button here if we want to get back to the original list with all of the films. Now when we click one of these buttons, what we want to do is update the list. How are we going to do that? We're going to use something called reactive declarations in Svelte. And I'm going to read this paragraph from the Svelte tutorial. Svelte's reactivity not only keeps the DOM in sync with your application's variables, but it can also keep variables in sync with each other using these reactive declarations. So let's imagine we had a variable called count that was set to 0. We can define a reactive declaration that sets a variable called doubled, which is equal to count multiplied by 2. Now if you define the variable doubled the normal way, that would be equal to 0 at the time when this was run, because count was equal to 0 and 0 multiplied by 2 is still 0. And if you updated the value of count, it wouldn't automatically update the value of this doubled variable. But when you use these reactive declarations, you can actually keep track or keep things in sync. And that works by tracking when the count variable in this case has changed and updating the value of doubled automatically when that change occurs. And that's going to update that to the value of the count multiplied by 2 anytime the count variable is changed. Now we're going to use a slightly more advanced example of these reactive declarations in the Svelte component. What we're going to do is we're going to take the list of films that we have in the film store here, and when the selected tag variable is changed, when a user clicks one of those tags, what we're going to do is we're going to filter down the film store automatically by whatever the tag is that has been selected. So what we're going to do just above the set tags function is define this reactive variable, and let's call it filtered films, and that's because we're going to filter the films down by the selected tag, and we're going to set that equal to the value in the film store, and we're going to use the array.filter function in JavaScript, and we're going to take each one of those films and we're going to apply some logic in a function here. So let's open a function body, and what we're going to return is a Boolean expression to determine whether or not each film should be kept in the resulting list that we're calling filtered films. So what I'm going to do is reference the film that we're iterating over at each step in this filter function, and that comes from the argument name of film. We're going to take that film and look at its tags, and again we're going to apply a function defined on JavaScript arrays, and that's the includes function. We're going to check if that film's tags includes the selected tag. So this expression will filter down all of the films to only those films that contain a tag that matches whatever tag the user has selected, and it's going to store the result of that in this reactive variable called filtered films. So let's copy the name of filtered films, and we're going to use that as the new variable in our loop in the markup down below. So if we go down to this section here, we're iterating over all of the films in the film store. We're going to update that. Rather than referencing the film store, we're going to paste in that reactive variable, filtered films, and for each one of those, we're going to render that out to the page. So that's going to work by filtering down by tag. Let's see that in action now and see if it works by going back to the Svelte application. And at the moment, we're not seeing anything. And that makes sense. We haven't clicked on any of these tags. By default, the selected tag, if we go to the top here, is an empty string. So if we look at the reactive declaration below, we are checking if each film has a tag that is equal to that empty string in this case, and none of them have that tag. All of the films have particular tags, but none of them are an empty string. So the resulting value contains 0 objects. So what I'm going to do in this logic for the filter function is add another condition that's going to check whether or not the selected tag is equal to that catch-all or that empty string. So let's add that now. We're going to add that first of all. We're going to check if the selected tag is equal to an empty string, and if it's equal to that empty string, we want to return the film, and we want to return all of the films. So that's going to handle the case where we have empty string. It's going to return all of the films. If that's false, we want to go to this OR condition where we check if the film has the tag that has been selected. So if the selected tag is the empty string, which it is by default when the page first loads, this condition will evaluate to true for every single film in the film store. Therefore, the resulting list will contain all of the films. So hopefully that makes sense. Let's save the component and go back to the page. And this time when we click comedy, you can see it's getting filtered down to only the Big Lebowski. And if we change that to Mafia, we're getting The Godfather. And if we click the catch-all, we can get all of the original films back on the page. So we now have this nice dynamic filtering system going on where we have tags on the page and we can filter down the list of films by those tags. And what we're going to do to finish this section is add the tags to each of the cards that we have on this page. Let's go back to the component, and we're going to go back down to the HTML code here. We're iterating over each film that we have in the list. What we're going to do just at the bottom below this delete button is add a new section here, and I'm just going to paste this in for quickness here. We're defining a div that is looping over each tag that the film has by looking at the film.tags attribute on the film object, and then we're rendering that tag out in a div. So let's save this and see how that looks on the page. This time, just below the two buttons, we now have the list of tags. So when we filter by a particular tag, you can clearly see that that's maintained in the resulting objects. So now that we've done the list page and we have this nice filtering system here, what we're going to do is we're going to allow users to add tags when a film is added to the database. So we need a new form field here that's going to allow users to add a comma separated list of tags. So let's go back to VS Code and we're going to go to the add component here, and that has a page.svelte file. What we're going to do is add a new variable into that component called tags, and because we want a comma separated string, I'm going to set that default value to an empty string here, and we need to bind an input to the value of this variable. So let's go down to the HTML for this add film component, and I'm going to copy this text input here for the description. Let's copy that and paste it just below the files, and we change the bind value that we have here from description, and we're going to add tags in there and reference that new variable, and we can change the placeholder as well. So let's save this component and go back to the add form here, and you can see we have a new field at the bottom for the tags. Now what we want to do is when we submit this data, we need to add the tags into the form data that's being sent to Django. So we need to go back to the component, and when this form is submitted, the handle submit function within the component is called. So let's go up to that function, and it's this one here on line 16. What we can do is, as well as appending all of the fields that we already had, we can add another data.append statement here and add a key called tags. And the question is, what is the value that we're going to add here? Now we can't just add the tags from this object here. That's a comma separated list. We need to split that by the comma, and we need to add each tag individually to this key of tags. So what we're going to do actually to start with is we're going to check if the tags that we have a length. In other words, has the user actually typed anything into that tags field? And then we can move this up into the if statement. Now if we do have tags, what we can do is create a variable that we're going to call tag list, and we can then use the tags and call the .split function, and we're going to split on that comma. That will then return an array with an element for each of the comma separated items. We can then take that tag list and call the .forEach function. That's going to loop over each element in that list. And for each element we are going to get a tag, and we can then call the data.append function, and what we're going to append into that tags key is the tag that we're getting at each step there. So we split the tags by comma to get a list or an array of these tags, and then for each one of them we are taking that tag and we're adding it into the data that's being sent to the server, and the tags are all going to be added to this key that's called tags. And that's important, it has to match the key that we have in the serializers.py file, and you can see that's the same name here. It's a tag list serializer field. We're adding that data here, and that's going to send the tags to the Django server, and that's then going to allow Django to add those tags into the database for that object. So let's now save this and go back to the page again. What I'm going to do is fill this out, and we're going to try submitting that to the server. So I've added this data for Chinatown, and I've given it two tags, mystery and crime. Let's submit that to the server, and we are getting that data back here on the right hand side, and you can see it's got the two tags that we added appearing on the bottom here. Now we have a couple of problems here that you might have noticed. We have the new film in the list, but we don't have the tag mystery appearing at the top here. So the film Chinatown, we gave it the tag of mystery. That should appear by default in the list at the top, but we don't have that. And if we refresh this page, you can see at the top here, we're actually getting too many tags. We have two tags here for crime. Why is that happening? We're going to solve these two issues now. If we go back to the code for our add component here, what's happening is when we send that request to the server to add the new film to the database, when we get back the response, we convert it to JSON, and then we have that data that we then add to the film store. The problem, or one of the problems that we're having, is that we're trying to go to the film list page, but that's happening outside of the fetch request, which returns an asynchronous promise. We need to actually move this goTo call into the fetch function and navigate to that film page after we have the response and after we've updated the film store. And the second issue was related to the tags that we were entering. If we go back to the page here and go to the add film form, the problem was I entered the tag mystery and then a comma, and then the space and then the tag crime. So that actually is stored, I think, in the database with a leading space, and I can verify that by going to the database browser for SQLite, and we can go to the tag table, and this stores all of the tags that we have in the database. You can see the first tag here is the crime tag, but the one on line 5 here, that contains that leading space, and that's the only difference between crime or between the two versions of this tag. So we need to get rid of any white space at the start or end of the tags. So how do we do that in JavaScript? Let's go back to the component, and here when we are splitting each of the comma separated tags, what we can do when we loop over each one of those, we get the tag, we can actually call a function here called .trim, and that is equivalent to a function such as .strip in Python. That's going to remove any leading or trailing white space from the piece of text. So I'm going to test this out. If we go back to the Django admin, I'm going to remove that Chinatown movie that we just added. So let's delete that from the database. And what we're going to do is we're going to add that back in on the front end. So let's refresh this page and go to the add film. I'm going to fill out this form with the same details now. So we have the same details and we have the two tags of mystery and crime. When we submit this to the server, this time we are seeing that we have mystery in the resulting list of tags here. So it's added that automatically after navigating back to this page, and we only have one tag for crime here, and when we click that we get back both of the films that have that tag. So the tag filtering system is working fine here. So that corrects the two problems that we had there, and in order to resolve the first one, we just need to make sure that we navigate back to the film page after we get back that data and update the film store. Now there's one last thing I'd like to do in this video. If we go back to the page here, what happens if I delete a film? For example, to delete Chinatown from this list, you can see that the deletion is successful, it's been removed from the list, but the list of tags at the top has not been updated. We no longer have any films that have a tag of mystery. So on the deletion, we need to update the list of tags that we have in the application. So let's go back to the list page, and we're going to go to the handle delete function that's defined in the film list page. This is called when we click that delete button, and what that's doing is it's checking the response status of that delete request, and it's updating that film store to remove the film from that list. All we need to do here is call the function setTags that we defined after the film store has been updated. So this line of code here will update the film store, and it's going to filter out the film that was removed. We can then call the setTags function, and that is then going to update the set of tags that are displayed at the top of this page here. And you can see that worked automatically, but if I was to delete the Big Lebowski, we expect the comedy and slacker tags at the top to be deleted when that happens. So let's try deleting that, and you can see that that is now working. That is deleted dynamically from the list of tags, and everything is now in sync. Now you could also add the functionality to change these tags to the film update page. So if we go through to the film detail page, there is an update form that's pre-populated with that data that's already entered for the film. We could also add the tags to this, and that's going to be very similar to what we have on this add film form. But I'm going to leave this as an example if you're interested in trying that out yourself. It's quite simple, but you will need to write a bit of code in the update component in order to make that work. So that's all for this video. In this video we've integrated Django-taggit with Django and Django REST framework in order to allow us to add tags to our films that are stored in the database, and we've then integrated that in the Svelte application. On the film list page, we're displaying a list of tags, and we can then filter down the list by clicking on one of those tags. And we also have the ability to add tags to a film when that film is created by submitting this form to the server. Now at this stage I don't have any more material planned for the Svelte and Django series that I'm doing here. I am planning to add authentication into a future video and also show how to deploy these applications and get them running online. But if you do have any requests for particular pieces of content related to Svelte or Django or the integration between the two, please let me know in the comments. If you're interested in seeing how this would work with Django Ninja rather than Django REST framework, let me know in the comments as well. But thank you for watching, and please like and subscribe to the channel. If you're also enjoying this content, please consider buying a coffee for the channel, and we'll see you in the next video.